Hello, my name is Dr. Gillian Judson, and I'm an assistant professor here in the Faculty of Education at Simon Fraser University. And I'm very interested in the role of imagination in leadership and learning, pre-K through post-secondary.
And I'm Dr. Mark Fettis. I'm a professor here in the Faculty of Education. Um, I have been involved with research on imagination since I got the job in the faculty almost 25 years ago now. Um, I did some early work with Professor Kieran Egan, who really founded the Imaginative Education Research Group, now the Center for Imagination in Research, Culture, and Education, CIRSE, which both of us, Gillian and I, have both been directors of in the past and continue to be involved with. So it's our pleasure to spend a few minutes talking to you about how we think about imagination and how it relates to our work as educators and how it might be of use or interest to you in your work as educators.
Yeah, so we could start with a very basic question and also a really complicated question it can take some time to fully understand, and that is, what is imagination? I can start. I often deal with many people who have misconceptions about imagination because we tend to think about it in terms of children or the life of fantasy or the make believe. I instead like to ground the conception of imagination and consider its soil. It's out of the imagination we can create and we can innovate. So, what is it then? It's the ability, I think, to envision the possible. It comes before we create. It comes before we innovate. It's it's a space of possibility. So I can think of all kinds of ways how that not only helps us pivot and adapt to a flexibly changing world, but it's very important in learning because in learning we need to envision the possible in relation to knowledge, to make that knowledge meaningful, to make that knowledge memorable, and that's something at the heart of Kieran Egan's work, of course, is that when we cultivate imagination, we evoke emotion. And so when you're teaching something and you evoke emotion and imagination, it becomes more meaningful. This is where its importance for educators lie. So that's a beginning. That's a start to my conception of imagination. How about you, Mark?
Well, I think it's worth saying that people in the West certainly have talked about and thought about imagination and things related to imagination for thousands of years, quite literally. Um, and and over the millennia, there have been many different ideas and theories shared around the nature of imagination. I mean, the term in English obviously relates to images, and so that thing that any normal human can do of just closing your eyes and visualizing something that is not present to you, but is can be out of your own experience. So that can be a recalled image, but it can also be a new image, right? An image that is created drawing on various things that you know of from your experience. Um, and so seen that way, it's very clear that imagination is intricately involved in art making, in and in general in creative processes. Um, but certainly current work in cognition tends to confirm that imagination plays a really fundamental role in all kinds of thinking processes, including analytical and synthetic and just a very wide range of the ways in which humans engage with the world and think about the world. So that I think makes it really important for educators. And I think, Gillian, we'd also concur that the emotional dimension of education
Yes.
of thinking is an important feature of imagination.
It absolutely is. So for any educators interested in learning more about imagination as we understand it through the Center for Imagination and Research, Culture and Education, or CIRSE here, we will always be talking about emotion. We will always, in the context of education, talking about the affective dimensions of knowledge, ways to engage and expand students' emotional connections with knowledge. That actually is at the heart of the ways in which we're thinking about imagination's role in leadership as well. And I know that we have a wealth of educators interested in imagination's role, but also leaders as well. So this is some work that I've been increasingly interested in doing, understanding human beings as highly emotional and imaginative beings. How do we then effectively engage those people who are in our communities, if we take that as a very general sense of leadership? Well, we know that as emotional beings, some of the most effective leaders are engaging leaders. How are we using our words to communicate in ways that help others lean into what we're conveying? How are we conveying information? How are we creating shared meaning? All of those aspects of educational leadership and learning and knowing together. How are we using imagination to actually enhance that? Importantly, as leaders all over the world, we know that these are volatile, complex, rapidly changing times. So imagination is also very important for the ability to pivot, to open into a new space, to problem solve, to consider ways of doing, knowing, and being that do not exist yet. So moving into the space of what is not yet, thinking of ways of reforming educational systems to be more inclusive, not just retrofitting them, but reimagining them completely. This is the work of really inspirational educational leaders, is causing and evoking change. So how does imagination contribute to that is something we're really interested in at CERSI. But what we have at CERSI is the theory and practice of imaginative education as a way of understanding imagination and then taking those practical dimensions into the realm of leadership so leaders can understand and enact and practice for themselves using imagination in their communities. So there's a really strong connection for me between imagination in learning and imagination in leading.
Yes, I would absolutely agree with that. And I'd say I think we both feel, Gillian, that imagination is perhaps especially important in educational leadership in the current very difficult situation that our societies find ourselves in.
Yeah.
You know, we are confronted with crises on multiple levels, economic, ecological, technological,
Absolutely.
and social. Um, and and it's clear that simply doing education, doing school the way that we have been doing it for the last 150 years in the West is unlikely to be enough to help us solve the problems that we're currently facing. We do need new ways of thinking about, and I love that word you use, engage with the world around us. Um, it it seems to me that one of the weaknesses of schools as we typically think of them is that they tend to situate learning as apart from the world around the school.
Yeah.
The school is something of its own space, um, which is valuable in some ways, and that can be a space directed towards learning and growth in ways that society, broadly speaking, is not necessarily. On the other hand, it can also be very limiting in the sense of decreasing your exposure as a young person
Yes.
to a range of people, a range of ideas, a range of experiences.
Yeah.
And so I think we both see the kinds of imaginative schools that we would like to see developed as involving many different kinds of learning and many different kinds of teachers, uh, qualified professional school teachers for sure, but also other people and beings from the more than human, the natural world, um, that could all become part of what a child learns from.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. So even having these kinds of conversations within leadership requires imagination. What does it mean to have other than human teachers and influence leadership? These are all vitally important questions as we face worldwide ecological crises. Just one piece specific to leadership is that we did a study where we employed imaginative education with leaders in training, pre-service leaders, and what we found in this preliminary study was that using imaginative education as a way of increasing those leaders' capacities to imagine, it caused so much unlearning for them. It really set them up to have a really different perspective on leadership. So it's exciting because there's practical ways we can start to use imagination more fulsomely in our K-12 classrooms. There's practical ways we can use imagination with leaders of those schools, with the named leaders, and with the informal leaders that educators themselves. So this is kind of some aspects of the work we're doing at CERSI, and I think it's what is most interesting for you, our Italian colleagues, as you think about integrating imagination more fully in learning and in leadership.
Yes, I think what we'd say based on our 25 years of experience of doing this here at Simon Fraser University, which is where the Center for Imagination in Research, Culture, and Education is located, um, is that you have to think about this as a long-term commitment. It's really not the kind of thing that you can successfully instill in the culture of a school or in the culture of a school system, or even in a specific group of teachers with just a couple of workshops. And of course, there are very few things in education that you can do that with. In any case, we all know that teacher development is a long, sustained process in order to be effective. Um, but I think we would agree that to really make imagination a central part of how teachers think about and practice education, and how a school takes it up, not only with teachers, but with parents, with the wider community, with the curriculum. Um, that is a commitment that should be multi-year. And so clearly leadership is absolutely essential, crucial for that to be able to happen.
Absolutely.
Well, so we hope
Thank
that
you.
this short introduction has been of interest to you. We do encourage you to look further into it. We would be happy to receive your queries here at the Center for Imagination in Research, Culture, and Education. You can find our website at www.cersi-sfu, cersi-sfu at
.ca.
.ca. Thank
That's
you.
it.
Yes. Um, and many thanks to our Italian colleagues at the University of Bolzano for their invitation to contribute with this short video. Thank you.
Thank you.